Will DevOps stay and have a lot of job opportunities this year?
For beginners, I would recommend without AI, nothing works.
Hi, Papuna. Thank you so much for accepting to do the podcast with me. And as you know, in the year 2025, and during starting of the year, everybody would rush to create videos on the roadmaps of DevOps or what are the things that you should focus on, etc. And I've seen a lot of those videos, but this time I wanted to take a different approach. The approach is more to involve someone who is actually working as a freelancer, because you guys will have the experience of what is happening currently in the market and what you should prepare, what you should not prepare to get a job, in 2025 as a DevOps engineer. Thank you again for joining, Papuna. Good to have you
Thank
here.
you.
Um, could you please?
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Could you please share your background to my family?
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. I am Papuna. I work as a freelancer in the DevOps field. Well, I have an interesting background. I started as a network engineer as my first role. Then I moved to the QA, mainly QA automation, and then like in the recent past 4 or 5 years, I've been working as a DevOps, full-time DevOps. So yeah, I got more experience in this field, and I'm happy to share my experience.
Awesome. So, starting off the roadmap, Papuna, we'll have a discussion about what are the things that people should focus on. Because as you know, there is a lot of, when you talk about DevOps in general, people would talk about entire IT subject itself, like from A to Z, and it will scare off people to prepare, even to start with, right? So we will discuss about what are the things that they should focus, that way they would get job as soon as possible with less effort or maybe less time. So with that, my first question and discussion point with you is that what is the programming language that you have learned, and what is the language that you currently use in your job, and how did you prepare, or what do you use daily?
Okay, on daily basis, I mostly use TypeScript. It is interesting because most of the time, the mentioned programming languages in the DevOps field are Go, Python,
Yeah.
or similar.
Yeah.
And I recommend, if you are a beginner, I recommend to start learning the Python language because it's easier. It's like easy to read and write. And it's more intuitive.
Yeah.
But personally, I use TypeScript because we use AWS CDK for infrastructure as a code.
Okay.
And CDK supports many different kinds of languages, including Go, Python, and others. But TypeScript is like first great support language, and we decided to use TypeScript. Especially, we use TypeScript in the application code as well, and so it's easier for the developers to join and collaborate on the infrastructure code as well. So that's the main reason. And actually, this is my recommendation. You should choose the language based on the project. If the development team uses some like specific language for the application code, it's usually a good idea to start writing in the same language, because in case of like in future collaboration and like involving developers into the processes, it's easier for them to get involved. And that's the main goal of the DevOps as well. It's not just tools. Yeah. It's also processes, and you need to involve as many people as possible to understand the entire concept of DevOps. Yeah. And yeah, that helps if you choose the language that other team members also know about.
Okay. And does it depend on the type of operating system that you are using? Because obviously, if you're using Linux, then you would use either Python, Go, or Shell. But as you know, there are a lot of DevOps engineers who work on Windows as well, because some clients work on Windows migration to Azure or whatever cloud, or from different on-premise to cloud. They choose PowerShell sometimes, right? So, but I think 80 to 90% still people would prefer Linux, right? Mostly as an operating system. Your experience, what do you think?
Yeah, as a DevOps engineer, since you work with the servers mostly on the cloud nowadays, most of the servers I would say is in Linux, any of the distribution.
Yeah.
So it's better to use Linux as your daily driver because you get a chance to work with it on a daily basis. And there are some cases, obviously, where maybe Windows servers are used on the cloud as well.
Yeah.
If that's the case, obviously it's better to use Windows. But in most cases, I would say getting familiar with Linux is better, and it will help you a lot because most of the containers are based on Linux distributions,
Right.
and yeah, most of the servers are based on Linux.
Correct. Um, if someone have to prepare Linux, from scratch, or maybe because they worked as a QA engineer, they don't have no experience working on the system administration side of Linux, right? What are the common things that you would do in your day-to-day job as a freelancer on the Linux operating system? Any system administration stuff that
Yeah.
you have to learn?
Yesterday actually I just ran the commands that checks the history of the commands you run in the past few months, and it gives you the list of like most used commands. So I can spin it up and I can take a look at myself, and I will tell you like most frequently used commands. So basically, like just looking at this, um, most of the time, even as a like experienced engineer,
Yeah.
you need to know about navigation commands to navigate through different directories like cd, ls. You also need to know about the creating files, creating folders, deleting them, like editing them, like these basic things, like seeing the content of the file,
Yeah.
like moving, popping, like these
Right.
basic commands will be like they will be your friend like even after several years. Like I'm looking at the like history of my commands and I see like them most of the time. I also see some other specialized commands, but mostly these basic commands are you need to learn them, and yeah, they will be your friends in the coming years. What do you think? Like any other commands, any technologies?
No, I agree with you. I think mostly instead of scaring away people to start uh, understanding different Linux utilities like sed or awk, those are a little bit
Mhm.
tougher to learn, but better to start with the basic commands, get more familiar with Linux terminal, try to move files or create files and all those things. And previously, when I started as a DevOps engineer probably in 2013-14, people used to focus on uh, installing Linux itself. But now I think with the cloud, you don't have to do that. You don't have to worry too much about the boot processes of Linux or how would you do that, those things. It's more just provision the Linux in a cloud environment or somewhere, or even virtualization environment on on-premise servers, on-premise infrastructure, and then just familiar with the Linux commands. Few commands that I used to get a lot of questions during the interview process were especially on the AWK, awk, and sed, and find, and then text manipulation. So these
Yeah,
used to be my common interview questions. Even in fact, when I attended maybe 2 years back, I guess I did not attend anything recently. These used to be the common questions that you used to get from the
yeah.
Linux commands perspective.
Well, I agree. And on top of that, I would add like any package manager that comes with the distribution.
Yes,
In case of Ubuntu, it's different. Like in
apt.
Fedora,
Yeah,
it's different. Yeah, Yum.
yeah,
So whatever the distribution comes with, it's better to learn it
yeah.
because you will use the same command in the when you're building Docker images, maybe customized Docker images. So yeah, the package manager from the distribution, and also like in the recent years, most of the distributions use systemd for service manager.
Right.
That might also be a good idea to learn more about.
Yeah.
And then like main like beauty of using Linux on a daily basis is that things will break Like as you install things like custom like applications, like different tools, things will most likely break, but that's a good thing. You will
Yeah.
get more familiar with like how to debug, how to
Yeah.
troubleshoot, and if
Mhm.
you do that on your computer on a daily basis, you will know more about like if you need it on the server as well. It will be easier for you to, because you probably saw something similar, like where to check the logs,
Correct.
how to debug specific command.
Yeah.
So things like that. If you do that on a daily basis on your computer, you will be more familiar with that on the servers as well if something goes wrong. So yeah,
Right.
that's the main idea of using Linux on a
Agreed.
as a daily driver. Or maybe you can have a like more Windows or macOS as a
Is it a
separate
base
device,
operating
and
system?
Linux as a home lab if you need.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I was a like Linux heavy user for years, and I used it as my daily driver without having a secondary device. But in the
Mhm.
recent years, I had to switch my gears to something else.
Right.
But yeah, they're basically as a home lab or as a daily driver. Then we have.
Yeah. And another common command that you must have used as well whenever you are spinning up in EC2 instances on AWS. You must be familiar with adding the volumes, disks, and then partitioning, and then formatting, ext3s or ext4s, etc., and then adding the
Yeah.
volumes, etc. So that is one common command. And I think the complexity of Linux depends on which part of role you are working in the DevOps engineer, whether you are working closely with the developers and creating the CI builds, etc. You might not do a lot of system administration stuff on Linux. But my prediction, I think, starting from this year or moving forward, would be that you'll have to get more into the administration part, because the SRE roles are going to get more and more as a lot of companies mature, and then they would pretty much automate the CI stuff. The incident management and those things will become bigger. So as much as possible, getting more
Yeah.
familiar on that part would really help people.
I agree.
Cool. So we've covered Linux, we've covered operating system, and I think if anybody wants to practice, do you recommend them to just install virtual machine on their laptop, like you said, Mac or Windows? I mean, Mac pretty much is closer to Linux commands, anyways. Or if they're using Windows, or do you recommend them to spin up something on cloud as a virtual machine and then use
Um,
practice commands?
well, I think it's better to, if you can, if you have resources, it's better to side load, like to have the dual boot setup.
Hmm.
Because personally, I prefer that.
Mhm.
There is a clear distinction of like operating systems. You can just load
Yeah.
to the Linux and use that.
Mhm.
And if you need Windows or macOS, you can boot it up as well.
Yeah.
And virtual machines, like it may slow down like both like host computer and also the running Linux distribution.
Mhm.
So yeah, I prefer to have a dual boot setup. Or if you have a like old laptop laying around, you can install Linux on that.
Mm.
But as you said, a lot of cloud providers comes with when you first register on them, it comes
Free
with like
tiers.
free credits.
Yeah.
So you can spin up like small server there as well, and then you can connect
Yeah.
from the console or from the SSH, and you can try that.
Cool. Okay. So that would cover the basis, I think, the basics of Linux and operating system. Um, Now, what are the system design stuff that you would want everybody to be familiar about? Like, for instance, people talk about load balancers, or DNS, and then how to set up web servers, or reverse proxy, forward proxy, firewalls, networking concepts. How much of these things would help?
Well, as a beginner, I think just to get familiar with the concepts,
Hmm.
that might be enough.
Mm-hmm.
But I would recommend learn by doing.
Okay.
Like there are many ways to do that in recent years and all the time, as far as I remember. There are like many different kind of self-hosted applications you can try. They are open source on the GitHub. or different Git platforms.
Hmm.
And I think it's better to try and run them
Yeah.
on your home lab, on your like cloud free tier machine, or like wherever you find fit. And that way you will see in action like how they work.
Mm.
I personally have a couple of my own self-hosted applications. Like I have a search engine running, I have different kind of front ends running for Reddit, for YouTube, and so on. I have a note-taking application, and you learn by doing.
Yeah.
You use, maybe they are packaged with Docker images. You can deploy them locally on the clouds of your
Mm.
choice, and you learn like networking as well, a bit of that, how they are set up, what do you need to configure to access from the web. So I think that will be more intuitive for the beginners to fully understand, because you can read a lot
Yeah.
about those concepts, like the concepts you mentioned, but I mean it's tricky to understand just by reading
Unless you
them. So
practice. Yeah.
yeah, unless you practice. Yeah, what do you think?
No, 100%. I mean, we see a lot of people going through tutorials, Udemy, etc. But unless you practice in your home lab or anything that you have on your computer, you would never get those concepts. It is difficult just to read the theory, because even during the interviews, they would ask you a scenario based question. How would you approach to a problem of, let's say, of DNS, or what is the issue that you found when you're setting up DNS? Then you can only explain them if you have tried it out, even for the
Yeah.
anything, like all the system design stuff. I agree with you on that. All right, Papuna, so now let's switch gears and go to the CI part itself, starting with the CI part. So as you know, we always start with Git. What is what are the common commands that you generally use when it comes to Git? And what are the different branching strategies, if you would suggest, in your experience with the clients? And then if somebody has to prepare for the Git, what are the bare minimum and what are the tricky, important, tough commands that they have to prepare as well for interviews?
Well, even today, if I need to revert the last commit, I always search for it. So yeah, even as a senior engineer, you don't have to remember everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, this one is actually very useful. You need to know how to revert the last commit. At least if it's a local commit, it's much easier.
Mhm.
But before that, like you need to know about how to pull the clone the repository, add the commit, push, add the files, remove the files, things like that. And yeah, most of the time, these are the things you need to know. But
Yeah.
modern IDEs already have like built-in like version control supported in within the IDE, so you
Yeah.
can use that as well. But I prefer to use command line interface of the Git.
Mm.
It's only a handful of commands that I use on a daily basis. But if something goes wrong, like I want to like yeah, it was a good example, like revert the commit locally or from the remote. Then yeah, these are the, like, sometimes you need to know do that as well, and even more like tricky stuff that's hopefully not usual that you need to do. Also, like merging, resolving the
Mhm.
conflicts,
Yeah.
things like that. Yeah.
So merge conflicts. I think in summary, all the basic Git commands: Git pull, Git clone, Git push, Git
Yeah.
pivot, Git merge, and then resolving the merge conflicts. Cherry pick. Not many times people would use, but still it is often asked during the interviews. How would you do that? And then some of the common best practices that you, as a, I think it depends on the seniority of the role. If you are joining as a junior DevOps engineer, then the expectation is low. But if you're joining as a senior DevOps engineer, that you are going to help an organization to set up the whole DevOps culture and create CI/CD pipelines from scratch, then you would have to help them to even come up with a strategy of how you would build the branches, or create the branches. What is the branching strategy that you would suggest them, like whether it is trunk-based development, or or creating more complex branches, and how different teams can
Yeah,
merge those branches, etc. Right?
yeah. We and I have also used trunk-based development in the past
Mm.
years.
Okay.
So I think it's the most straightforward one.
Yeah.
You have the main development branch where you like push the changes. You have
Mm-hmm.
the release branch where you like do the release, deploy on staging maybe. That is between development and production. And then once you draft the release and like push the release, it deploys on production.
Mm.
And yeah, there are different strategies like how to apply fixes, hot
Yeah.
fixes. There are many ways. Like you can, like in my experience, you can, if there is a hotfix requirement on production or staging, you can push the hotfix on the release branch and also on the develop branch, so they're up to date.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, then once the release is done, you continue working on the develop and create a new release from develop once everything is ready, and start working on the regression testing and hotfixes again and so on. So yeah, it depends. I mean, there are many different things you can do, and it's mostly comes down to what the team agrees on. Like even DevOps is different in different projects and
Yeah.
companies, right?
100%.
You can have different kind of DevOps topologies, as they say.
Yeah.
You can have separation of development and operations. You can have some overlap. You can have like different setups, and based on that, responsibilities of DevOps engineer varies. Like it can be completely different, only one role, and different on another. That's the tricky part when we're getting started in the DevOps, actually, because you don't know like what to learn, because it can be different on different projects. But I would say my recommendation would be to learn what's widely used and what's popular at the moment. You can check that on different reports, like every year, maybe Stack Overflow has its own reports, like which languages are popular, which tool sets are popular.
Yeah.
Like there are like DevOps reports as well. We know that AWS, for example, is like most used cloud provider, so it's a good idea to learn that.
Mm.
So to navigate through these like different tool sets and new tools coming up each day, it's better, like good rule of thumb is to just choose that gives you like more options to apply to. Like as a candidate, you have more options if you learn the tool that is widely used, right? So that's the common approach. And to come back to the like CI/CD and branching strategies and release cycle. I mean, it's hard to say. Like there is no one formula. You have to learn about like developers' work, what they do on a daily basis, how they build application, how they test application, and then you need to incorporate that in a CI/CD pipeline.
Mm.
Basically, replicate that like on a maybe GitHub Actions on third-party workers, like to build, test, and release. These are like mostly it comes down to that. Like this is the main things that you need to do in the CI/CD pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you can have like different it on top of this, like some specialized requirements if you have. But yeah, that's it. You need to build, test, and deploy.
So moving little ahead from the Git, after you commit the code, you would have to build the code, right? And then companies use different CI platforms, whether it is GitLab or GitHub Actions now, or even Jenkins, which used to be quite a famous platform for setting up the continuous integration and deployment. So what is the common trend that you see that companies are moving towards? If somebody has to prepare for the CI platform or tool, which one would you pick, or which one would you suggest them to pick?
Well, I personally use GitHub Actions, and I like it. But well, you need to understand that they are similar. They solve the same problem, right?
Yeah,
No matter
orchestration.
what you
Yeah,
choose, like I said, build, test, and deploy um, needs to be done in any platform. I think GitHub Actions, GitLab,
yeah.
CI, or whatever it's called. Jenkins. So the concepts are the same.
Yeah.
Just preference of the dev team, maybe what they have more experience on, but underlying things are the same. So it doesn't really matter. I mean,
It doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, you can start with GitHub Actions. If you have GitHub account and have some projects on GitHub, why not just use GitHub Actions? And then if you have some other requirements, you can switch gears to other tool as well.
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of misconception that everybody has to learn Jenkins, but I think in recent past, based on my research and as well as based on talking to different people, I found that in your job description now, they would either say any one CI tool, whether it is GitHub Actions, Jenkins, or GitLab. It doesn't matter. They don't say like Jenkins is must. Nobody would say that because everything is YAML based.
Yeah.
Everything is interchangeable. It's quite straightforward based on the control node, and the same concepts apply everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I would say, just learn YML format and how it works, because it applies to many things in DevOps.
Correct.
Like many configuration files are written in YML.
Yeah.
And just to know how to structure it and how it feels and how it works, it just generally it will help you with many different tools. So
right. And one trend that I see, Papuna, is that larger, bigger companies, enterprises, they tend to use GitLab. Whoever have been using Jenkins, they're slowly migrating to GitLab because of the simplicity, because you don't have to have different code base, Git, and then, different platform Jenkins. You just can have everything in one place, either it is GitLab or GitHub Actions or whatever. So I see that trend where companies are investing more just one simple platform to do both things together, instead of keeping them separate and as an operational overhead for companies as well.
Yeah, I see the same trend as well. And GitLab is a good choice for maybe large companies, as you said, because maybe they want to self-host their own GitLab
exactly,
instance.
for the sake of security.
Yeah. For that, they just, why not use the same CI/CD solution that it comes with, right? So
exactly.
Easy choice.
Exactly. So in the build process, like in the CI process, what are the common tools that you generally integrate? You must have done it in your previous experience or in the current role. Like for instance, Sonar Cube or different tools that you integrate to check the security checks or static analysis, etc., etc. So there are many things that you would integrate, or there are very few things that you would integrate. Depends on the project again. But what are the common things that you have integrated as part of the CI?
Well, I have actually used Sonar Cube for static analysis. And yeah, it's a good practice to have that. As part when you open up a pull request, for example, it does all the things like builds and tests the application, and also checks does the static analysis on the change files. And it's easy for you to see if you need to fix if there are any security issues, if there are any improvements that can be made. Yeah, always a good practice to have that.
So how about like the unit coverage? Do you enforce certain standards of unit coverage, or it is up to developers or the team?
You mean the unit tests?
Yeah.
You know how it goes. I mean, you try to achieve
70% or more, but it will never happen.
And more. Yeah, it never happens because it's tricky, right? Business wants the features faster, but it takes time to write the tests. Not only writing, but maintaining the tests are tricky.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, depends on the project, but I would say there is this responsibility of test automation is to be like maybe divided, and how to say, should not be on like one team or person. Yeah, maybe some type of test automation is to be done by the QA team, some other by dev team, and but it's still tricky to communicate like which parts is handled by which team. Yeah. So yeah, it's not like it's a tricky situation. Most of the time, you learn by making mistakes and you adjust the team based on that. based on like one formula where you start and everything is perfect. Usually it starts like that. Everyone has some kind of percentage that, and you need to like reach that percentage, but usually something goes wrong, at least during the maintenance phase. But then, like what I would say in terms of testing, whether it be unit tests or some other type of test like integration or end-to-end tests, it's always better to start automating the stable features, the features that have been stabilized and they more or less will stay the same in the coming months and years even. To work on them, like also most frequently used features by the clients, if you can identify by analytics or by your like business domain knowledge which parts of the application are used most of the time, it's better to focus most on them rather than like have some kind of arbitrary percentage value that you need to try to reach that. And like who cares? I mean, it just adds a burden on the dev team or the team in general, and it's not effective. So just identify which parts of the application are most critical. Criticality can be defined by the team, what it means to be critical.
Yeah.
Based on like maybe it's frequently used or maybe it's not frequently used, but if something goes wrong, it's like maybe it affects the reputation or something like that. And identify, list them, and work on them on unit level, integration level, on end-to-end test level. Just try to test these parts of the application, and then you can include it in the pipeline. But because if you another things, another thing is like if you have a lot of tests, even if you reach 100% of coverage, it may not be like good for the team. Like it will slow down the pipeline, right? It will take more time to run the tests. It will take more time to analyze the failed tests. So it's not usually, I don't like the idea of having like high percentage of coverage on the application. That's my opinion.
Okay.
And I can speak this much about this topic because I worked as a QA automation engineer and lead, and I worked with this field. So yeah, that's why I had to say more about this.
Okay. So the CI, after the integration is done, you would create an artifact, and then I mean you can use any artifactory or whatever tool. It doesn't matter really.
Yeah, usually, like you build. In my experience in the past years, you build with Docker. You package the application in the Docker. You upload it to the image registry.
Yeah.
And then use that image tag to deploy to anywhere, like
Any
your
environment.
choice of
Either it could be that, or if the company doesn't have containers yet, the maturity is still not yet there, then they would use normal jar files or whatever to deploy to any environment, cloud or
Nexus.
on-premise. I think the concepts of deployment would still remain same. The CI/CD part, it is just how you're deploying and what you're deploying would change. So the question that I had was that on the CD part, right? I mean, if you're using cloud, I think you would use different. Like if you're using containers, you would use Argo CD or whatever. It totally depends on how company wants to use that. But let's say if you're using, I think, on-premise servers, still there are companies, a lot of enterprise companies who are still using on-premise environment, set of VMs, without any without any horizontal scaling or anything. So they are still dependent on some sort of configuration management, to deploy. And that's where in past years, Puppet or Chef or Ansible have become more famous. Now Ansible is still trying to hold its ground in the configuration management. But I think slowly my again, opinion on that is that slowly it will phase out with the use of Docker containers. There's no need for Ansible if you are deploying in a dynamic environment. Like you said, if you're using containers, then I don't see the purpose of Ansible, right? So what is your take on the configuration management?
Well, to be honest, maybe it's just me, but in the past years, I have mostly worked with cloud-based startups and companies, and I almost always use Docker.
Yeah.
So the last time I had like experience with Ansible was just my own project. I
Your own
think I
home
still
lab?
have it on,
Okay.
yeah, home lab. I still have it on GitHub. Maybe I don't remember. It was like more than 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's just me. But I agree. If you have that setup and requirements, obviously you need to learn it and use that.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think don't stress too much about learning this. I think if you are smart enough, then you don't have to spend time on Ansible. Even if you do not have it on your resume, I think it is fine, is what I'm
Well,
trying to say, I
it's
guess.
I would say like in the beginning of this meeting, I mentioned like just try different things. Like I mentioned mostly in regards of self-hosted applications
Yeah.
to try them on your home lab on the
Mm-hmm.
cloud to learn more about the
Yeah.
concepts,
Yeah.
but also try different tools. There are like on GitHub, there are like awesome lists, like awesome DevOps, awesome like self-hosted CLI tools, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's fun. Like you can see all the different tools that are open source and available, easily available. You can like try them. You can just install them, run them, and see how it works, and you learn like concepts that is like built into that tool. Like for example, if you use a monitoring tool, some kind of monitoring tool for to monitor Docker containers in CLI,
Yeah.
maybe there is a CLI text user interface tools
Mm-hmm.
to run the command and monitor containers. You will see like which metrics to look for in the containers and what are the most important things to look at, and yeah, things like that. Just if you have time, if you have like if you are interested and curious, why not just try different tools on your home lab, and whether you use it or not, it's still a good experience.
Yeah.
You will feel more confident, and you will have a thing or two to say
Talk
in
about.
the
Yep.
during the
Mm-hmm.
interviews. Yeah.
Yep. 100% agreed. And so now let's say that companies are using, of course, most of the companies are now in the cloud. uh, which cloud would you pick in 2025 if somebody is starting to learn DevOps or trying to move from different technology
Yeah. Well, I'm very biased
towards
towards
AWS?
AWS. Yeah, because I would say I mostly have AWS experience and
Yeah.
only maybe some experience with GCP,
Hmm.
Google Cloud.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, like previously when we were discussing like how to learn, for beginners, I would recommend to learn what's popular and what's widely used
Yeah.
to increase your chances of you will see like more job opportunities that way with the tools that you are more familiar with because it's like most used.
Hmm.
And one of the such thing, the same thing applies to cloud providers. And we know that AWS is like most used worldwide,
Yeah.
but depends on the specific regions. Maybe in some parts of Europe, maybe Azure is more used,
Yeah.
like some other parts of the
I think in
world,
the Middle East
something
they use
else.
Azure a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Depends on the regions as well.
Yeah, it depends on the region, but in general, if you take a look at the stats, you will see that AWS is still on the first place,
Yeah.
and they are pioneers,
Hmm.
and they were the first that created this field of cloud providers and cloud solutions.
Yeah.
So I would say just start learning AWS. And also I recommend to learn one cloud provider service like extensively
Mm.
to focus most of your time on one of them, not
Yeah.
try to learn all of them at the same time,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Because the concepts apply to everywhere, and it's better to just get familiar with the one cloud provider as much as possible, and if you have to, you can learn something else. That's my opinion. What do you think about that?
No, I think it is better to focus on one cloud service provider uh, as much as possible, like you said. And then once they're comfortable, once they get their first cut as a DevOps engineer, or once they get into the job, then I would suggest them to go with one more cloud, because that will expand,
Mhm.
I think, their resume to get into, let's say, uh, maybe in 2 years, every company feels that Azure has a lot to offer, then they will start slowly getting into Azure as well. But if every company, whatever I have seen and worked with, have one primary cloud service provider, most of the time
Mhm.
AWS, and then they have secondary cloud service providers to add to their,
Mhm.
let's say, AIML stuff. For data stuff, they would use GCP. For something else, they would use Azure, something of that sort. But they'll always be one cloud service provider, because of the discounts that they would get for the compute that they're using. So yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense to focus on one cloud at a time.
And as a beginner, no need to learn like
One tool.
every service and every resource within
Yeah,
the cloud provider.
yeah.
Like no need to do that. You can see there are some lists of like most used services in AWS, for example. Like you need to know about EC2,
EC2.
S3, ECS, VPC, like things like that. Like most used services that you need for your applications.
Right.
And I think that you can find a better like list of services in one of the certification syllabus. They have, I think it is part of the solutions architects associates syllabus. No need to take a certification, but uh, I
Yeah.
I recommend it
Mm-hmm.
as a beginner. It's a good thing to like stand out
Yeah.
within the lot of candidates. And but just to know what to learn, like which services to learn, just take a look at the syllabus, and you will see like most like frequently used services, and you can start by learning them, and then
Makes sense.
if something special, yeah, specialist comes up, you
Mhm.
can learn other services as well.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense, because there are like thousands of services. You don't want to waste your
Yeah,
time.
yeah. It will, yeah, it will look like scary. You may want to like just close down your laptop or just go for a walk. When you see all those services, it just, yeah, it demotivates you. But just know that no need to learn like everything from the beginning.
Yep. Um, Now, the container stuff, right? We spoke about Docker, and like, what is the platform that you are currently working on? Like, whether it is EKS, or in Google Cloud GKE. How much of Kubernetes do you have to be aware of to get into DevOps role now? And what do they have to learn with respect to the containers?
I will say unpopular opinion now, but in my like in my example, I can say that I have never used Kubernetes in the past. I mostly use AWS ECS, which is the same thing. It's a container orchestrator,
Mm-hmm.
and but with all that being said, I still recommend learning Kubernetes because
Yeah.
it will give you competitive advantage
Mm-hmm.
if you know that.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of job opportunities, a lot of projects that use Kubernetes, right?
Yeah.
It just, in my personal experience, I somehow mostly use
ECS.
AWS ECS, which is the same thing, same concepts.
Yeah.
It's not different. But yeah, if you know Kubernetes and if you have Kubernetes skill in your LinkedIn, in your resume, obviously
Would add more value.
hiring managers really like that.
How about, like, how would somebody have to approach to the whole containers itself? Now we are hearing about Podman, and the Docker it's been there for quite some time. So how did you prepare for, to get into the actual learning of Docker basics itself? What did you do to learn?
I would say just the understanding of what it does, like it gives you basically the isolation in your
Mm-hmm.
system,
Yeah.
gives you isolation, like subsystem, so to say, which is isolated from rest of the system, and you can safely run the applications within that system, right?
Hmm.
So just the understanding what it does, why it's needed. It's needed because of the replication of the same environment on
Yeah.
different machines. And yeah, it has a lot of benefits. Like you can build the image and share it with your coworker. They can also run it, and mostly everything will work fine because it has the same system packages, same dependencies. It doesn't matter on like which operating system you run on, like what kind of device you have. So it's completely isolated and more stable than like usual way that was in the past years before Docker.
Yeah.
So it's easy to package the application in more stable way and distribute it, right? You can
Right.
upload it in the image registry, which is basically like your image uploaded on the cloud somewhere, and then you can pull it and run the application anywhere. So in case of ECS, that's what we do. Like we build the application, we do all the testing, static analysis, all this stuff. We upload the image to the ECR, which is the container registry service on AWS.
Yeah.
And then we update the task definition of the ECS to use that image tag to update the application. So
Okay.
that's one of the example of using Docker.
But how did you prepare when you were not aware of Docker itself, initial stages?
I have a good story about that. When the Docker came out, I don't remember exact year, but it was like the first year that Docker came out, and I was always like, I started in network engineering, but I was always like Linux fan. I had like Arch Linux setup and like all the hardcore stuff. And I was always looking at the different kind of tools, CLI tools, like different tool sets, monitoring, whatever, like whatever the new thing, shiny thing will come up, I will try that. So I was actually the first one, maybe, to have tried to use Docker on the production. I was at the time working as in the network operations center, and we needed some kind of network devices monitoring solution. And Docker was very, very young. I don't, at least in my country, no one was using Docker in production, let alone in development as well. No one was really using that. So maybe I want to think that I was maybe one of the first that used in production. It was very young, like maybe first year of like the Docker release. It was very young. I don't remember exact dates and years, but yeah, even outside of my country, I didn't hear that anyone was using it in production. And yeah, I basically provisioned one Docker container for the database, another one for the actual application, which was PHP application for network devices monitoring. And yeah, everyone was happy. It was working just fine. Yeah, and to get back to the question, how to prepare and how to learn Docker when you don't know, just look for the applications that may interest you. There are so many different kind of applications. Like as I mentioned, in self-hosted applications are mostly packaged in the Docker images. So you can pull those images, you can run them locally on the cloud, and you will learn all the commands that you need to know, like Docker run with all the flags, Docker PS to check the containers, how to go inside the container in the running container, and so on. You can also then try to customize this image, write it to customize Docker file.
Yeah.
And then if you have a similar setup as I had, like you need a separate database application in a separate image in the container, you can use the Docker Compose, which is YML file. You describe all the different containers and you can run all of them together and you will see the application running just fine. And yeah, step by step, just try, learn by doing, as always.
So we discussed about deploying the Docker containers. And then the crucial part that we haven't discussed yet is how do you actually create the infrastructure, which is whether you create EKS clusters or whether you provision EC2 instances or even any part of cloud services when you provision. What is the IAC tool that you're using in your current role?
Well, at the moment, we use AWS CDK,
Mm-hmm.
which is Cloud Development Toolkit.
Yeah.
And in the to compare with the maybe Terraform or CloudFormation,
Mm-hmm.
which are more like declarative language, they have their own specific syntax. In the case of CDK, you actually write the infrastructure as a code. You actually use, maybe you can use TypeScript, Python, Go, other languages as well. They have many supported languages. But in my project, we use TypeScript for the CDK. For the reasons I already described, maybe other application code and developers already use TypeScript, so it's a good idea to use TypeScript, the same language that the team uses already.
Yeah.
And with the CDK and in our infrastructure as a code in general, you have a lot of benefits. You have the same benefits as with the typical any kind of code. You can collaborate easier, like you can use the same version control strategies as you already have for the application code and software development lifecycle. You can use the same methods and strategies like reviewing the code, running the tests. The good part of the YC is that you can actually write the tests for the infrastructure.
Yeah.
CDK has the capability to do that. So same like merging process, like review process, code analysis, testing, like everything like that we already know and are familiar with as part of the SDLC, we can use the same practices in this case as well. So other than that, like you have benefit of creating your custom constructs, as it's called in the CDK, which is basically, for example, bucket. You need to create S3 bucket. It comes with like already good enough like security in mind and standards in mind, like the configuration for the S3 bucket as part of the CDK. But you can extend these constructs and you can create your own custom construct which has like specific permissions, policy, whatever is required in your organization, and you can easily share this custom construct within the team. So everyone, whoever provisions the S3 bucket within this organization will follow the same standards as it is defined in this custom construct for this S3 bucket.
Got it.
So this is also a great use case for compliance. Like if you organization is going through the like maybe certification process, like you have compliance requirements for SOC 2 certification, ISO certification, you can create standards in your organization with these constructs, and you can share within the organization, and everyone follow that.
Yeah,
this is one of the best use of the OIC. And yeah, I feel I'm missing some of the benefits, but yeah, these are like you should definitely use OIC and CDK. I specifically really like CDK. But this comes like maybe it is a bit advanced, like it comes at a later stage. As a beginner, you learn like everything we discussed, like you learn Linux basic, like shell commands, you learn Git, Docker, whatever like we discussed.
yeah.
You learn like cloud providers, services, like from the console, from the web UI, at least. And then, like once you get to this stage, you start provisioning everything as part of the infrastructure as a code, and everything becomes much smoother. Actually, in my opinion, I prefer to use CDK rather than provision resources from the console. It is much more complicated for me from the console. So many like configuration fields, buttons, things like that. But in the CDK, you just import the specific service as a construct, and you provision it with configuration parameter you want. And it's logical. You see how they connect to each other. Maybe you need to provision ECS cluster with EC2 instance capacity providers. You see like the steps, what you need. You need VPC, you need load balancer, you need auto-scaling group, you need launch configuration, how they connect to each other.
Yeah.
You see in the code, you read it, and suddenly everything makes sense, how they connect to each other and how they work together.
Yeah.
So, yeah, very good practice to learn more about that.
Okay.
What do you think? I think you have you can say more about Terraform and some other. There are many types of infrastructure as a code, so maybe you can add that part as well.
No, I think CDK makes more sense, like you said, because you can use just one language across all the tools, and it will be easier for both developers as well. And as well as developers can also understand the infrastructure as a code whenever you use CDKs, right? It's natural for them. They don't have to depend on you to write provisioning or anything like that. So that's the advantage with that. But more often what I've seen, especially working with the big companies, is Terraform would add more value because of it's cloud. It's not cloud native. I mean, or service provider native. So they use multiple clouds, and they can use different providers using Terraform much easier when compared to a specific CDK with respect to CloudFormation. That's the biggest advantage. That's why I've used both CloudFormation in past and Terraform. And the main reason that they would use Terraform is because of the simple reason that you can use across multiple environments.
Great thing about CDK, Terraform has its own CDK as well. It is called CDK TF. Yes. Which is, I think they liked the idea of it from the CloudFormation and from AWS. They liked how it was working, and they did the same. What it does, CDK is basically, it creates, in the case of AWS CDK, once you write the code of all of the resources, it creates the CloudFormation template based on that. So when you build the CDK project, it creates CloudFormation template, which you can use to deploy.
And then finally, you will get a CloudFormation stack after you deploy.
Yes, exactly. So CDK is kind of, it's that it generates a CloudFormation rather than in the past you needed to write CloudFormation template yourself in JSON or YML format. Now CDK does that. And for the CDK TF, I think it does the same thing. You write the code and it generates the Terraform template.
It's more developer friendly tool. Yeah.
Yes.
So the final I think that what we should discuss is basically on the monitoring part. What are the current, what are you using currently in your company? Main monitoring stack. I think most of the time you're using, especially on the AWS side, are you using any AWS specific monitoring tools itself, or do you have any enterprise solutions like Datadog or New Relic or whatever?
Yes, nowadays I use whatever comes with AWS. Because like when you provision, for example, database or load balancer or maybe Elasticache, OpenSearch cluster, whatever you provision, all the services have the built-in health metrics. You can already see the metrics that you are interested in. And also for the logging, it's very straightforward to configure CloudWatch logging. With Lambda functions, maybe it's out of the box. Logs are written in the CloudWatch. With the ECS applications, it's easy to configure to ship the logs to the CloudWatch. So you can create this environment for logging and monitoring much easier way in AWS. But I recommend learning about, usually on the interviews, in my experience, they like you to know about the third-party solutions like Prometheus. Yes. Maybe OpenSearch for logging and data visualization. We actually use OpenSearch for logging. It's a good idea because you can ship all the logs in one place in the OpenSearch cluster. And then it's easier to go through the logs, filter them, create dashboards, and so on. So personally, I use mix of AWS provided metrics, and it's easy to create alarms based on that in the CloudWatch. And I also use OpenSearch to ship all the application logs OpenSearch, and it's we prefer that.
Okay.
For some applications we use CloudWatch logging,
Mhm.
but in general this is our setup.
Awesome.
So I recommend whichever cloud provider you choose, just use whatever the monitoring solutions they have out of the
They
box
have
and
first set
logging.
up the alerting or anything with that, and then work on anything
Yeah,
else from outside.
yeah,
That
and
makes sense.
then you can include them. Yeah,
Because again,
exactly.
concepts are very similar. Whether you're using Prometheus or whatever, the same metrics pretty much at high level, you'll monitor
Yes,
the same thing. Just
yes,
the design will be differed from tool to tool, and then
yes.
yeah.
But maybe during the interviews, they prefer you to know because they want to see how you can set the monitoring up from the scratch.
Oh yeah, yeah. True.
But AWS and other providers handle the underlying
Correct.
thing or whatever goes on behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
Hmm.
But maybe during the interviews, they like to see you do it from the scratch with these tools,
Very good
not
point. Yeah.
cloud-based tools. So if your goal is to, and this is why we have this conversation, I think, is to get started. Like there is no easy way, but like maybe quickly to expose yourself to like different job opportunities and so on. Yeah, you need to consider these things that we discussed.
Okay. So the final question that I have is, if you were to pick maybe one or two certifications that you would recommend for people who wants to come into DevOps role, what would those be? I mean, you can pick three if you want, but just asking you for main certifications that they should focus.
Um, Again, I'm biased
AWS,
towards
yeah.
AWS, and I just recently got DevOps professional certification from AWS,
Hmm.
and I really like AWS certification syllabus and learning programs.
Hmm.
They give you clarity, like they maybe you already have experience, years of experience, maybe, or you are just starting. In any case, these exams and certification programs give you clarity to connect the dots and like organize your knowledge
Mm.
in a way that it's easy to remember them. And because of that, you can, and especially if you're just starting, certification is a good plus. It gives you slight edge. Like if you have the same candidates with a similar like outcome, maybe you choose the one who has more certification or at least one certification if the other one doesn't have any. So it's always good to have this like bonus point. It shows that you can sit down, learn. It shows the persistence and like eager to learn. So I recommend AWS certifications.
Hmm.
Like
DevOps Pro,
they have
yeah.
associates. Yeah, DevOps professional is a tricky one. You need to have several years of experience. It's not easy to get. But if you're a beginner, just associate level certifications
First
are
practitioner
fine.
and then associate level, yeah.
Yeah, stuff like that. And for the Linux, maybe I really like LPIC. There is LPI, Linux Professional Institute or something like that.
Hmm.
It's called LPIC 1 and LPIC 2 certifications. We can link them maybe in the description.
Okay.
It will be easier to see. And they give you like they teach you like Linux fundamentals and like intermediate level Linux, depend on the level of certification you get.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, in my personal opinion, I feel that if you have to pick one or two certifications, one would be, like you said, cloud provider certifications, which is going to add a lot of value. And the second one would be, I'm seeing a lot of companies, like we discussed, are asking about containers and platforms. So CKA would add a lot of value to your profile. Um, Certified Kubernetes Administrator. And then yeah, that's about it, I think. I don't believe in people getting 15, 20 certifications just to put it on the LinkedIn, because, you know,
Yeah,
I don't think there is no expectation
it's
from companies.
I think it is addictive.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning of my career, as I mentioned, I was a network engineer. I was like 16 years old when I got my first certification. It was CCNA certification. And then like 2 years later, I got CCNP certification. And then you want more. Like you like get into the role and it's very addictive. Like you see all the budgets you have. But it's not in practice. No, nothing beats the just doing the stuff. Like
Right. Yeah.
whatever I mentioned, just set things up, do the home lab, like deploy some self-hosted services or the applications you like, stuff like that. I mean, it will teach you much more than any certification. But certification shows different skill sets from of you. Like
Yeah.
it shows persistence. It shows that you can just sit down and study, especially in today's age.
Yeah.
Everything is very destructive. Like you have short span of like attention span. It just shows you are a persistent person. You can follow the plan and do the thing. But in terms of actual knowledge, just doing the things are better in my.
Okay. I'll end this podcast with one final tricky question. You can be very honest about it because we are having this conversation. You don't have to, say that DevOps is awesome. So my question is, um, will DevOps stay and have a lot of job opportunities this year, or is it like people have to move on and also learn something else? What is your take?
I think DevOps is here to stay. The tricky part is that DevOps is not junior level position. That's why it's tricky to get started in DevOps when you don't have prior experience at all.
Yeah.
Because you have to do a lot of things and a lot of acrobatics to get yourself liked and noticed by hiring managers. Because it's not a junior position. At least you have to have some experience, That's the tricky part. And especially in today's market, what I notice is it's not easy to get a job, but still, DevOps is here to stay. We will have opportunities. DevOps is kind of bare bone of all the modern applications. Without it, nothing works. So it's very future-proof profession, in my opinion. Even it is very hard, and it will be very hard to be replaced by AI or whatever is going on at the moment. Because there are so many moving parts, and DevOps is not only the technology, but as I mentioned, the communication with the team, getting everyone involved in the processes and teaching them how to be more effective. It's not just like learning the tools and like doing like programming the infrastructure in the code. It's not just that. So yeah, considering everything, it's very future-proof profession. The jobs will stay, and there will be even more. Yeah, I think it is very tricky as a beginner and without any prior experience to get started and get noticed. It's because from the get-go, from the beginning, it is kind of already middle or senior level profession because you have to have a lot of experience.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's not for a junior level person or a person who do not have any IT prior experience. It was awesome talking to you, Papuna. Gained a lot of insights. I hope people got useful information out of this podcast. And if anybody have any questions, please put it in the comment section, and then we will put important links in the description. Thanks again, Papuna, for joining the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, GK. I appreciate inviting me. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you.